Hello, everyone. You are live with me, Karen McDermott of KMD Books, and the amazing Ron Malhotra. Welcome, Ron.
Hi, good morning, Karen. I can't see all the people that are here, but I just want to quickly say a good morning to you. And regardless of where you are, I think we might have some people from the States. It might be evening or night for them, so welcome.
We are streaming onto a few platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube today. And if you are watching and you have a comment for Ron, please pop a comment in the or into the comments box, and I can see them. So, Ron, we are here today celebrating the release of your book, Indoctrinated. I cannot wait to have this conversation with you to talk about this really important topic. Are you ready?
Yes, I just see a few names now. I see my friend Enrique. I see my friend Karen. I see Emma. I see Savitri. Wow. Now I feel a bit more comfortable that I'm with some friends here. So that's fantastic. And Shivakant, welcome as well.
Amazing,
And
isn't it? It's nice
we've got Dama as well. Damayanti, welcome. Yeah, it's great to see some people that have been in my circle for a while. And Olimita, good morning as well.
Yay. You're not going to be able to keep up with those. They're running of people.
No, I know. I'll stop right now. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. It's so good of you to join us. And this is a new platform we're using this time. It's StreamYard. So usually we use Zoom, but this time we're using StreamYard. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoy this conversation. We really do. So Ron, let's talk about Indoctrinated. What is the book about?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for the people that are joining us, because it shows me that you've probably had a suspicion around the fact that the way we are being taught and the way we're being educated, there is something not quite right about it. So thank you for being in the minority of people who are actually here questioning what's going on. And as you know, Karen, you've been my publisher for a while, and I've had a very strong interest in personal development and wealth management, which has been my background for 2 decades. This is a topic I never thought I was going to write about. It is so different for me to write about this. But for the last, probably the last 6 or 7 years, I have had the opportunity to be working very closely with a lot of professionals and executives. And in that time frame, I started to identify patterns in thinking that got me wondering if our education system is teaching us adequately. And I'm talking about critical thinking here. So lately, with the whole, I think the last 3 years, a lot of people are talking about critical thinking. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that a lot of people that we have held in high esteem and considered to be highly educated are not necessarily people who can apply critical thinking. And so the question is, what is critical thinking? And this is what prompted me to write the book, because I started to see that even some of our most educated people, as deemed educated by society, did not necessarily have the ability or the skill to critically analyze information. So critical thinking basically means the ability to be able to assess a situation objectively to get to the facts. Now, the word objective means devoid of personal opinion and devoid of feelings. So I just want you to think about this. The ability to assess a situation objectively, meaning without personal opinions and without feelings. And the second skill that leads from critical thinking is critical reflection, which is the ability to look at a situation from all angles. And I found over the last 7 years that I have been actively working with a lot of professionals and executives, I started to identify that majority did not have the ability to critically analyze information. Now, I don't say this as criticism. I was actually one of those people myself, and surely even now I have many blind spots. However, what I've started to realize is that there seems to be a correlation between how many years we spend in an institution and how indoctrinated we are likely to be. And indoctrination simply means where we have been given a set of beliefs and we believe those beliefs to be true without any cross-examination. And so for me, it was this whole, I think the last 7, 8 years has been interesting for me, because it's helped me identify my own indoctrination in all the areas where I have been brainwashed, where I did not do sufficient cross-examination of information, but also I've been able to see it in others. And why is it a problem? It's because I'm starting to see that if people don't see where they're indoctrinated, they're very likely to make very poor decisions, resulting in them moving away from the life and lifestyle that they actually truly want. And that's what prompted me to write the book.
Oh, there's so much to unpack there, Ron Malhotra. It's an important and brave conversation to have in this current day, but it's something maybe that some people don't want to face up to either. Have you been indoctrinated? So this is something, just a personal question from me. How do we undo that? How do we undo it?
I think the first thing we have to realize is that mind control comes typically from information control. Okay. So whoever is controlling the information has the power to control minds. You can't control minds without controlling information. So how do we learn? We learn through gathering information our whole lives. And where do we gather this information from? We gather this information from parents. We gather this information from educational institutions. We gather this information from media. We gather this information from people of authority, like teachers, and so on and so forth. And we have to be open to the possibility that if the source of the information has a vested interest, or if the source of the information does not have the ability to critically analyze information, and they've passed it on to us, it is quite possible that the information that we have lacks accuracy, that we may not have accurate information on a particular topic. So I think it starts with the possibility, the awareness of the possibility that all of us are brainwashed to some extent. The question isn't whether we're brainwashed or not. Here is the most critical question. Is our brainwashing supporting us or is it hindering us? That's the most important question. So if I'm supposedly, let's just say I'm an educated individual and I've spent 16 or 20 years in the institutions, schools, universities, and corporations. Generally, society would deem me to be an educated person because the way we define education is in extremely narrow terms. We look at academic and professional education and we say if an individual possesses academic and professional education, then they are educated. We do not look at the fact whether this individual is educated and wise in other areas of life that are extremely important as well. So this basically happened because of hyper specialization in the industrial age. What happened was a lot of our professional and educated people know a lot about very little. So they're highly aware about a technical skill, but when it comes to areas beyond those technical skills, which are equally or more important in their life, they have very little awareness and very little desire to even get that knowledge. And this is the problem. I think that there is quite a possibility that the more years you spend in institutions, sometimes you become even more closed-minded rather than open-minded. And the whole idea of education should be to keep an open mind and remain in the zone of asking questions. And so this is what concerns me about the way, and look, there are many types of indoctrinations. You can indoctrinate people culturally, through religion. You can cause indoctrination through media. I'm mainly interested in institutional indoctrination because that's what affected me. Because I realized that my whole life, up until my early 30s, I believed I was a highly educated individual because I couldn't see my own blind spots. But as I started to become more self-aware and socially aware and aware about political strategy and aware about history and aware about psychology, I started to see my own blind spots. And it was frankly quite scary because I started to realize, my God, for so many years, I was so confident about so many things based on what I was told, but I never really cross-examined any of the information. So now I actually teach people how to make decisions, how to assess risk, and how to analyze the truth. And if you don't know how to do those things, you are actually susceptible to indoctrination.
I love this conversation. All right. So what was the most surprising discovery in your research, Ron?
Well, my whole life, I believed that those who had the highest level of ignorance were the most indoctrinated, but that's actually not the case. But the most surprising research for me was that it's the people who are educated, as deemed educated by society, that are most vulnerable to indoctrination. So that was the most interesting thing. So it wasn't, so you know how if you look at the word fool as, okay, and I've coined I've coined a term called the educated idiot. So what is an educated idiot? Well, an educated idiot is somebody who has a very high level of technical capability, but when it comes to self-awareness, and when it comes to social awareness, and when it comes to awareness about their world, and when it comes to awareness about other areas that are highly relevant, they massively lack in those areas. So a fool is not somebody who is ignorant. A fool is somebody who is ignorant about certain areas, but believes that they do not need to educate themselves on those areas. So if I meet somebody who has ignorance in an area, but as long as they're seeking knowledge to develop themselves, I don't consider them to be a fool, because we've all been fools. I mean, if we apply that definition of fool, we've all been ignorant about something. But the moment we say, no, I don't want to look at this information because I already know, and you have a blind spot in that information, that's what makes you a fool. And we assume that educated people cannot be fools, but that is definitely not the truth. It is very probable that if your education produces myopia, or it produces closed-mindedness in you, that even though you may be highly proficient in your technical area, there is a pretty high likelihood that you have deep blind spots and you're a fool in other areas. Now, I don't say this in a derogatory fashion, because I've seen this in my own behaviors in the past. But the thing is, as long as we realize that there are potential gaps, that what we believe is not necessarily the truth, our feelings are not the truth, our opinions are not the truth, and we have a desire to seek the truth, I don't think you're a fool. But the moment you say, no, I think I know exactly how this is, and you shut your mind to any possibility, any alternative, I think that's where you risk becoming a fool. And I think that's where we need to start to identify the indoctrination within us. And the reason why people defend their beliefs is because of cognitive dissonance. It causes us a lot of disturbance to realize that what we've believed potentially our whole life is probably not the whole truth. And so that disturbs people. So when you challenge people with it, a lot of people shut down. And I have seen this tendency to shut down more in educated professionals than I have seen in any other demographic. And that's what got me to research institutional indoctrination.
Oh, I can so relate with this. And the reason that they close off is because they've put their heart and souls into this one aspect of their life to move forward into, and to think that they should have, been more curious and been more aware of other aspects of life. And
that is so well said. If I've lost you there, sorry. I just lost you.
We're back.
And what you've said it's incredible, because, I feel empathy for those who all of a sudden they realize that their education has not prepared them for the real world. That education where they, and that education that they've acquired over 16, 20 years or even more has not made them wise. It hasn't facilitated self-awareness. And I understand the shock of that. And so the shock is so high that people don't want to face the reality of it. I understand that, because it's disturbing. But that's where you start to see the indoctrination. You have an inkling that you have blind spots, but instead of digging deep and trying to mitigate those blind spots, you start to defend yourself and you start to defend your position. And that is pure indoctrination right there. Because, as I was saying, the whole idea of education is to induce curiosity in people. And you have to be in this mindset of not knowing things, not forming conclusions, not taking swift action on things that are still questionable. And you've got to be able to remain in that state for long periods of time and not jump to a conclusion. Whereas I find that if you're a professional, especially if somebody gives you data, or if it's backed by expert opinion, they're very likely to fall for that. There is almost like a halo effect that formal education produces, where you see somebody who's got a whole list of credentials behind their name, and you're very likely to assume, without any cross-examination, you're very likely to assume that this person, what they're saying, is the ultimate truth.
Yeah.
So how do you identify if any narrative or any piece of information is the truth? Well, first of all, you've got to have what we call healthy skepticism. Anytime you hear any piece of information or narrative, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, what is the source of that narrative? Is it a credible source or not? That's the first question. The second question you've got to ask yourself is, does the source potentially have any vested interest in this narrative? The higher the probability that they have a vested interest in that narrative, the higher the probability that it's not the truth. So, for example, if the wine industry tells you that drinking wine is good, okay, it may be true, it may not be entirely true, but it's the fact that the wine industry funded the research that says wine is good for you could potentially also mean, because they have a vested interest in that research, that they may not disclose the entire truth. And that should result in curiosity for us to go, okay, what else is there? I need to look deeper than that. And majority of people don't do that. They see research, they see the word expert opinion, and they go, bang, this is the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. The third is there sufficient empirical evidence? People don't look for empirical evidence. So I was in the world of finance. We got most of our education from educational institutions, and we got most of our education from investment fund managers. Whatever they're telling us, how do we know it's the truth? We have to do our own independent analysis, because we are telling clients what we have been told. Don't we have a duty, a best interest duty, to even evaluate what we've been told, to make sure that there is sufficient empirical evidence before we present it to our clients? Again, I saw the same thing in our industry, financial services. I saw that the majority of educated professionals were very keen to take the information that's been given to them by investment fund managers and given to them by educational institutions and pass it on without any vetting to clients as the ultimate truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then the another thing that I look at now, anytime I come across a piece of information or narrative, the other thing that I look at is universality of application. Does this work for everybody the same? Or does it work for majority of people in the same way? If it doesn't, I'm very likely to get a bit more skeptical and suspicious about it.
Yeah.
But again, I have seen this time and time and time again. I don't think professionals ask enough questions, which is why, and this also plays out in other areas of their life, their career decisions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them settle. They're very good at following protocols, very, very good at following rules and systems. And that comes from our education system, because you think about how we get rewarded in the education system. Our education system rewards us not for individual expression.
Yeah.
It does not reward us for creativity. It rewards us for compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And then that gets carried from school to university, and then from university to corporations. And so that behavior is cultivated at such a deep level that a lot of individuals, professional individuals who are highly educated, refuse to ask questions because they're rewarded for compliance, right? They're not rewarded for asking questions. They're not rewarded for creativity. And then how does that play out? A lot of them end up not innovating, not disrupting, not creating, not discovering, and they end up following a protocol and a system. Now, again, none of this is criticism. All
No.
it is, and again, I would argue that if any professional took offense to what I'm saying, well, ask yourself, why are you getting offended by this? If you're getting offended, then you're actually proving my case, because then that would indicate that you're so indoctrinated that you're not prepared to look at any fact objectively, not even prepared to investigate it because of how it's making you feel. You see, and that's one of the first ways you know what the indoctrination, that you're potentially indoctrinated, when you have resistance towards an alternative narrative. That's when you know you're potentially indoctrinated, because you don't want to look at things from another perspective. So what is the solution? I see the question that's popped up there. And this is one of the things. The solution is not to shut down schools and universities. They have a place. Academic and professional education has a place, a very important place. So a lot of people will assume when I talk about this, and some of the comments that I get from professionals who are highly triggered by this will say, oh, so you're saying that we should not get a degree. What about this? What about that? And you're starting to see how they're getting triggered. And you're also starting to see how they cannot objectively evaluate facts, which only confirms what I've been saying about them. So the solution is not to shut down schools and universities. The solution is to complement academic and professional education with three forms of education that I feel are highly critical for individuals to be holistically accomplished and fulfilled. What are those three things? Number one, mastery of self. Mastery of self effectively means going through an education where you discover your strengths, your values, your purpose, your passion, your goals. So you're starting to make decisions based on your individual blueprint rather than what's being dictated to you by society, culture, or religion. Second is mastery of business and financial fundamentals. Now, this is something that people get confused about, and they don't know why this is important. Well, this is important because we live in an economic world. And I cannot tell you how many professionals I have come across who are working so hard, are well educated, but going nowhere financially. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the point of working in a job, a highly paid job? What is the point of getting all this education only to end up at your retirement with not having sufficient assets to be able to live a dignified life? What is the point? And I don't understand. I think this happens because so many people who go through our institutions are not educated on how the economy works, how the financial system works, and whether we like it or not, we're in an economic system, so we have to understand these things. And the third thing is mastery of spiritual laws. I mean, the research, and I know that you've been into this for a very long time, as I have.
Yes.
The human condition is not just a mind and a body. We're a mind, body, heart, and spirit. And our wellness, our health, our capabilities are all significantly enhanced when we understand and embrace our spiritual nature as well. And I'm always surprised how little intellectuals regard spirituality or spiritual education or spiritual intelligence or spiritual awareness, because they work and they operate predominantly in the intellectual domain, and they tend to dismiss the instinct domain and the intuition domain. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not about saying, hey, intellect is bad. Intellect, it solves a lot of problems, but it also creates a lot of problems that cannot be solved by the intellect and requires us to transcend into another form of intelligence like intuition or like instinct so that we can solve those problems. And intellectuals typically get stuck in their head and they try and do the same thing over and over again. That doesn't work. It's a bit like if you've seen a fly trying to fly out of a window, and you know that if the window's shut, it keeps banging its head against the glass. And even if you open a window on the other side, the fly doesn't think that it needs to adopt a new course of action. It continues to bang against that glass window until it dies. And we've seen a tendency to overthink, overanalyze, over-rationalize, preempt in a lot of professionals and executives that I have worked with over the years. And again, this is not a criticism of anybody. Please remember, I have spent most of my career in education, in institutions. This is not about criticizing anybody. This is about saying, hey, it's only for your own benefit if you can start to understand that as a human being, you are so much more than your intellect. Mm-hmm. You have spiritual powers. Self-awareness is incredibly important for fulfillment and success. And if you combine all of that, the three things that I have talked about, mastery of self, mastery in business and financial fundamentals, and mastery of spiritual laws and spiritual intelligence, into and with your professional and academic education, you have a much higher probability of being a whole human being. And your level of accomplishment and fulfillment automatically increases from there.
Oh, it's just, this is a conversation that needs to be had. And you are observing this. I have observed the same. And when people understand that these three succinct together, harmonized, you're offering a gift to everyone with this. If you do this for yourself, wait till you see what happens in your life. Not, for your whole life. And you mentioned holistic. So can you just, for people who don't understand, like, what is a holistic approach to things? Can you share with people?
And thank you. It's a great question, because the word holistic typically gets overused in the healing and wellness domain. And so because anything that's used in that domain is typically dismissed as being highly esoteric by people who have left brain thinking. So typically professionals and executives will say, well, if there's no data to back it up, I'm not going to regard this. But holistic simply means multidimensional. Okay, we are multidimensional beings. The human condition is not We're not one-dimensional beings. We are multi-dimensional beings. So, for example, let's just say you are at the top of your career. You're at the pinnacle of your career, but you don't have peace of mind. Or you have peace of mind, but you don't have great health. Or you have great health, but you don't have your financial future secured. Okay? Or you have a great job, but you're not fulfilled by it. So this is what we call multidimensional thinking. So think about an individual who has peace of mind, meaningful relationships. They have financial security. Think about the fact that they have meaning in what they're doing. They're making an impact. People respect them. People trust them. They're healthy. Now, that's what we would call a holistic human being who has the ability to balance all these different things in their life. They're not off balance. And they're not seeing success as something that needs to only happen in a single dimension. They're seeing success as something that needs to happen multidimensionally. They want to maximize and optimize their life in every way possible, rather than assume that they're accomplished overall in life because they're only accomplished in one area. Now, career success is extremely important to me. However, health is extremely important to me as well. So is financial security, peace of mind, and meaningful relationships. Otherwise, I'm a one-trick pony. I've done very well in one area, but I've neglected all the other areas of my life. And that's what holistic basically means. And you're not doing it for anybody but yourself, because as a holistic individual, you are going to tap into your creative potential. And from there, you can achieve so much more. Yeah. And I think our education system doesn't even entertain that fact. If you look at the people who are at the top of our political world, top of the medical fraternity, top of our judicial system, a lot of those individuals are one-dimensional thinkers. They don't examine. You look at a lot of the people who are at the top of the corporate world, they do not examine the long-term implications of their action. A lot of CEOs don't think about the impact on the environment. They don't think about the long-term impact on people, because it's the way the system is structured. It rewards you for metrics that can be measured, but it doesn't go beyond that. Mm-hmm. I'm all for it. I'm not saying that we should not have measurable metrics, but I think we need to understand that life is so much more about things that we can count. It's also about things that we can sense. And I think when the moment you start to disregard that and you go, well, where's the proof? Where's the source? Well, your observation, how you feel things is also a source. And I just think that sometimes indoctrination produces that closed-mindedness where you will only value hardcore data that you can touch and feel, even if it's corrupted and contaminated, over your own observations and your own intuitive sense. And I think that's where we start experiencing problems. And as we can see, a lot of issues right now in humanity. And let's not forget, if you actually go and do research on the number of fatalities that happen in the medical world, despite all of their education, or you just type in the word expert opinions that were wrong in every single area. We're not saying to disregard expert opinion. What we're saying is, let's not put people on a pedestal just because they're highly intellectual.
Yeah,
that's the whole idea of this indoctrination, is to identify the indoctrination and the tendency to emphasize anything that comes from a person of authority or anything that is mainstream without questioning and without cross-examining it.
Mm-hmm. And you can still do it with respect. If something within you are the person that's connected to the source of that information. If somebody's feeding you an expert opinion, for example, say a medical opinion, or if a teacher teaches you something and it just doesn't feel right, intuitively you will know, something in you will say, yeah, that doesn't sit with me right. There's something more here. And you don't suppress it, act on it, be curious, ask the question. Isn't it, Ron?
That's right. And that's what happens to a lot of individuals who become indoctrinated. They suppress their inner voice and they give a lot of consideration to the external voice. And in doing so, they become lost. There is an internal compass that we all have. And I think sometimes we lose connection with that internal compass because we tend to overemphasize something that's on paper and something that's endorsed by experts. I mean, in the book, on the actual, just so you know, on the first page in the book, I talk about the 3 steps to indoctrination. Number 1, repeat a message over and over again. Number 2, create a strong feeling in the recipient. And number three, have the message endorsed by people of authority. That's all it takes to brainwash people into believing that what they believe is the truth. You repeat the message over and over again. After a while, that message goes from your conscious thinking into your subconscious. Make sure that it creates some sort of a feeling in the recipient. And third, have it endorsed by people of authority. Now, this is exactly how things have happened in the past. I'm not going to go into the specific examples here, but you can study history, where any time in history, people have been convinced to carry out mass atrocities on their fellow human beings. There was a clear case of indoctrination. And let me tell you now, we are more educated than we ever have been in the past, but the indoctrination is actually becoming even more prominent, demonstrating that there is no negative correlation between education and indoctrination. In fact, it appears to me that there is a positive correlation. More educated we get academically and professionally, the more prone we are to indoctrination.
Yeah. And education doesn't just happen in an institution. It also happens, when you're out in the world and learning, because we're always learning as well. So I think, isn't it, be the leader in your own life and build that up and be that leader for yourself and process things for you and make it your own, really and truly. And
that's the thing. But a lot of people will agree with what you've just said. However, a lot of people will agree with what you've said, but you look at where people actually spend their time and money. Yes. Majority of our resources on education are allocated towards academic and professional education, and majority of people do not have the resources to be able to allocate towards self-education, personal development education, spiritual education, financial education, business education. So you can clearly see what people value, where they will spend their time and money, and where they won't. And as a consequence, what are we seeing? We are seeing very high incidence of mental illness, depression, anxiety, violence, suicide. Why? And where is it happening more? Well, it's happening to people who are actually in the professional world more than it's happening to people who are not professionals, right? Because they have developed a skill, but they haven't developed self-awareness or emotional regulation. So there are tremendous gaps in their understanding. And a lot of them, this is how they fix the problem. Their way of fixing the problem is to go and acquire more professional education. Instead of addressing and seeing the gap, they tend to, when they feel inadequate, they tend to do more of the same rather than taking a different path. And that kind of shows you the inflexibility in their thinking, right? And that is the issue. And again, who is it an issue for? Well, it is an issue for society because the truth never emerges, but it's also a massive issue for the individual who doesn't evolve and doesn't achieve a level of maturity and ends up making poor decisions because they're easily misled by vested information and vested interests.
They hand their power over to somebody else. And that's all part of the self-mastery, isn't it, Ron?
Correct.
Taking time to get to know yourself, what your core values are, and aligning your ambition with that.
That's correct. And that's exactly right. If you're not living from the inside out, you are automatically living from the outside in. But you can't live from the inside out if you have done no work on yourself and you have no awareness about what makes you unique, what is your individual blueprint, and you're not connected with your own internal compass. You are going to live from the outside in, and you are the perfect puppet for anyone that can control information, right?
Well, we kind of talked about why the problem exists, but can you just emphasize on that a little bit?
I think it just comes back to what I said earlier. The problem exists because of the way we perceive education. Once upon a time, education meant wisdom. Today, it's acquisition of information and data in a very specialized form. So I personally think that if you are devoid of wisdom, and wisdom comes from the truth, in any area, there is information and then there is the truth. It is our responsibility because the truth is never immediately evident. In most cases, you're going to have to dig for the truth. And so the acquisition of wisdom is intrinsically tied to the acquisition of the truth, to the pursuit of truth. You cannot get wisdom without the pursuit of truth. What surprises me is how many professionals are content with the fact that they've learned enough to be able to carry out a technical job and have zero curiosity to dig deep into other areas. And that is a concern to me because they immediately value any information that comes from the institutions without any cross-examination, but they're not really motivated to go and seek information for themselves. And I think and I think it affects them because I mean I was just looking at being in the world of money and wealth. One of the things I realized also is over the years I have come across so many professionals, some in the world of finance with master's degrees in the world of finance, who still do not understand how to secure their financial future. They're not aware of their spending habits. They're not aware of how they perceive money. They don't have the ability to understand that they need to secure their financial future. And I see significant gaps. And I say, how can a person who has a master's degree in finance not understand basic money management? How does that happen? And I see this time and time and time again. And I think that's the for me that's the critical reason why I wanted to write this book. And as I've said, that indoctrination comes in all forms, but I was predominantly interested in institutional indoctrination.
It is a fascinating book, and let's talk about this extra book and who needs to read this book, do you believe, Ron?
I think anybody that has a desire to become an independent and autonomous thinker should read this book. Secondly, if you're a professional and you're finding that your career has stagnated and your life has stagnated, you probably need to read this book as well, because potentially there is an assumption that you don't need to know anything more because you probably reached the pinnacle of your career based on your skills. But I make a clear distinction between data, information, knowledge, insights, and wisdom. And I really strongly believe, and this is not just me, historically, from the best philosophers and spiritual sages to some of the best teachers in the world and the best leaders in the world have always advocated that it's the pursuit of wisdom that results in a better life. So I think anyone that wants to have a better life feels that they're potentially being brainwashed, doesn't know how to evaluate information, is feeling stagnant, I think needs to read this book. Also for the sake of your children. I mean, all of us have children and the system is very well entrenched in society. They have to go through school and many of them will go through university. Mm-hmm. It's again not about discouraging them from acquiring formal education and professional education. It's more about them understanding that they should not assume that that education by itself is going to be sufficient for them to be able to live a fulfilling and accomplished life. And so I think anybody that wants to raise children who are holistically developed as well, I think probably needs to get their hands on this book.
Oh, amazing. Well, I requested for answers there in the comments, but I think everyone would never question you. They have got everyone is just so inspired by your words and so many amazing comments. I'm just going to post one here. Pursuit of truth is never ending as new dimensions are getting added to current paradigms. From, I'm not even going to say your name, but thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. I see Ashiva and Savitri. Thank you. And I see all the comments there. Thank you so much. I'm just reading them. Fantastic.
Yeah, and Karen there. And we have Eleanor joined us. Hello, Eleanor.
Yeah. I love what Karen says. Karen, you have to have hunger for truth and righteousness to find it.
I just find it back to curiosity, doesn't it, Ron? It's a zest for life when you're curious. And then I think
the moment you find yourself eagerly adopting or dismissing something, that should be a trigger. I'm very quickly forming a conclusion to either embrace it or to dismiss it. To me, that's a red flag. So what I say to people is when you come across a new piece of information or narrative, don't be too quick to adopt it. Don't be too quick to dismiss it. Spend time with it, evaluate it, play with it, and try and look at it from different dimensions. And only when you go through this process, things will start to emerge, and you're less at risk of making decisions from your blind spots. So I think this is the process that I apply. Anytime I come across any new piece of information, I ask myself, how do I know this is the truth? How can I be certain? And as I said, the test of truth that I shared with you earlier, try and apply that to as many situations as possible, because a good quality of life comes from good quality decisions. And how can we make good quality decisions if we cannot analyze information? You see, so it's all intrinsically linked.
It is. It is. We've got a question here. Do you see anytime going forward education institutes teaching us the skills you talked about, or is it going to continue the same way? Do you see the way out, Ron?
Priyal, and I hate to sound depressing on this. As much as I'd like to, I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, simply because the system is so deeply entrenched, and the system is deeply tied to governance, which is how countries are governed politically. And I think there'll be a lot of lip service in the system, as there has been in the last 10 years. I've seen there's been a lot of lip service around teaching kids money management. But I do not see a significant shift, especially by deeply entrenched institutions. I think there may need to be a disruption, and I think the disruption is already happening. What you're seeing now in the market through an emergence of coaches and speakers and trainers and educationists, what you're seeing what you're seeing there is potentially a response to the fact that our work system and our education system is broken. So what you're starting to see is disruption through the coaching industry and the training industry. And I think you're going to continue to see that. But the collective there at the moment is not as powerful as the power that institutions have because of their political connections. So I don't think that we're going to see significant change in this area in my lifetime, at least.
You just touched on something there that made my heart do a little somersault. So the coaching and all of the teaching that happens after schooling is a response to probably the unraveling and the undoing of what was taught, because that people can find themselves, so then they can make better decisions for themselves.
Exactly right. And as you know, and I know that you do this as well, you take people inside again rather than outside. You kind of help people reflect on things. You enable the process of independent thinking. As a coach, consultant, or trainer, or a speaker, that's your job. And we know that once people are awake, they can't unsee what they've seen. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, oh my God, I have been living in a bubble and I have never questioned it. And I'm going to start to question it. And I think it's not about having an excessive level of skepticism, because you can't live like that. You don't want to be an extremely negative and bitter individual. What you want to be is a sensible individual who doesn't just adopt things easily and get swayed by the halo effect just because it's coming from a person of authority and it's being pushed by mainstream institutions. That's really the point. And let me give an example of how many skills are so highly relevant to having a fulfilling and successful life that are missing from the education system. So I'm going to give you a small list here. Psychology, emotional intelligence, money management, investing, decision-making, time management, risk management, persuasion, negotiation, advanced communication, consulting, selling, marketing, business building, doing deals, relationship building. I mean, I can give you skill after skill after skill. These skills are not just something that are slightly necessary. They're absolutely essential for anybody that wants to live a successful and fulfilling life. Meditation, spirituality, wellness, health, you name it. None of this is included in school and educational curriculums. Talk about business degrees as well. I've done an executive MBA. And look, it certainly helped me in many respects in being a committed individual and being able to finish projects and assignments. But I realized that what I got taught in my MBA degree, my master's in business degree, was shaping me to become an employee in a corporation and assist me with management capabilities rather than business building capabilities. Again, confirming for me that educational degrees do not want to support independent thinking. Yes. And so for me, it's about, hey, this is how it is. Anyone that defends the system, I would say, well, let's have a debate on this and let me demonstrate to you how many individual skills are absolutely pertinent, especially today. We're no longer in the information age, especially today. And I can tell you that so many of those skills are still not incorporated within our education system. And that's what makes me a little bit skeptical about the fact that the education system doesn't seem to have an interest in producing critical thinkers, independent thinkers, entrepreneurs, capitalists, investors, people basically who are in charge of their own life. What it appears to me is what they want is a demographic of compliant workers who are not going to question things and work for the system. And to me, I just feel like anybody that doesn't question the system is exposing their indoctrination.
Can I ask one question on that? Why
Yes.
have they got this fear and holding on to that power? What is it that they fear will happen if everyone is giving the holistic skills at an institutional level, a foundation for life?
I think you alluded to that earlier. I think, and you talk about one of the things that intellect doesn't do. IQ is not a substitute for EQ.
Yes.
So when it comes to emotional intelligence, you're more likely to lack emotional intelligence as a professional. Why? Because you have spent 16 to 20 years developing your IQ, but where were you developing your EQ? And EQ has 4 elements, and I think it was Daniel Coleman that said this. Self-awareness. So first you've got to have the self-awareness that something's not right. That how do I think? Self-awareness basically means evaluating your own thinking. And a lot of professionals don't do that. They don't evaluate what they're thinking, what they're concluding, what they're asserting, what they're assuming. So self-awareness starts there. And self-awareness is very much a byproduct of emotional intelligence, not of IQ. So it starts with self-awareness. And that's where a lot of professionals fail, because they refuse to even ask themselves the questions. And then from there, it's about, after self-awareness, it's about emotional regulation. If you are feeling resistant to a new piece of information because it's not making you feel nice and you're prioritizing your feelings about facts, what does that say about you? What it says about you is you're a person who doesn't understand feelings, doesn't confront feelings, doesn't have the skill to overcome those feelings, and you immediately shut down when you feel something negative, rather than evaluating that you're not feeling good. Why are you not feeling good? And being prepared to look at your blind spots. So I think a lot of professionals have this fear, and all fear comes from ignorance. And so what happens is, instead of admitting that they've been wrong, which is actually the characteristic of a leader, hey, you know what? I got it wrong. But it's not about blaming you. I did not write this book to blame professionals. The book was written to highlight the problem and say, if you want to solve the problem, you're not to be blamed for it, but you're still responsible to solve the problem. And you're not going to solve the problem if you're not prepared to evaluate your own thinking and your own assumptions. And you're led by feelings instead of being led by the truth or facts. And so I think that's where we've got to make the start. And that's where we start to unindoctrinate ourselves. And we have any hope of being an independent and autonomous thinker only when we go through that process. And so we've really got to disregard feelings, and we've got to prioritize the truth over how we feel.
Absolutely. Well said. Can I give an applaud? Now, guys, Indoctrinated is available on most platforms across the world right now. It's available at KMD Books. And Ron will be having this conversation throughout the month, I'm sure. And looking at the conversations that we are having in the comments, there's a lot of people that support this conversation and know that it's a must-have to be had, even though it may stir things up. We have Eleanor who shared outstanding insights, and it is an insight you hold out that olive branch for someone to think differently. It may suit someone else, but it may not fit you. So it's not a one size fits all in life, is it, Ron?
That's right. And look, I understand that it's going to cause resistance, but for me, the resistance is only cementing what I'm saying. Because where is your open-mindedness? Where is your curiosity to understand more about it and research it more about it? So if people shut down because they don't like the content or the message in the book, to me, that's just a further reinforcement that we are witnessing indoctrination. right? So again, I did not write this book because I'm trying to incite controversy. However, I feel that we're at a critical point in humanity where more of us need to wake up, and we need to wake up first within ourselves. And I think that something like this just sheds some light on the topic. I don't have all the answers. I have more questions. And I think you should have questions too.
Yes. Ask why. Why? Thank you so much, Ron Malhotra, for a very insightful conversation. Everyone's learned so much from it, but guys, go grab the book, Indoctrinated. And if you have it, we'd love to hear what you think, and please share your reviews so that others can benefit as well. Share what you think, what your thoughts are. What do you get out of the book? What does it stir within you? Because Ron shares shares his knowledge and perspectives in this book, but it will ignite and do something, stir something within you. So just honor that and ask why. Ron.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate your support. I know you've been with me for quite some time, and you've been supportive of a lot of the work that I have done. I appreciate every single one of you that's here. I can see your comments, and I thank you so much for your support. More importantly, thank you for your curiosity. I don't even care if you don't support me. I have the greatest respect for you if you're just curious, but thank you for doing both today. And I'm highly grateful that I had the opportunity to talk about it. And I know that a lot of you are well known to me, and I know that you are curious, and you are individuals that are seeking the truth. So thank you for doing that, because collective consciousness cannot improve without an improvement in individual consciousness. And thank you, Karen, for enabling the process, and I appreciate it. And then I'm so glad that I was recently awarded, the award, that the independent award that we got for this book. I think further cements that this work is needed, but we need more people talking about indoctrination and resisting attempts to indoctrination, rather than just talking about the book. So thank you very much again for your support today.
My absolute pleasure. What an amazing note to finish up on. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us and for taking the time to comment and just really support this conversation. Bye, guys.
Thank you again. Thank you. Have a great day.